John Whitmore was a man who had everything: wealth, status, and a mansion filled with treasures. Yet, despite his success, he struggled with trust. Ever since he became a millionaire, he questioned the motives of everyone around him. One morning, he decided to put his maid, Maria, to the ultimate test. Maria had been working for him for almost 2 years. She was quiet, diligent, and always respectful. But John wanted to know, was she truly honest, or was she just waiting for the right moment to take advantage of him? So, he came up with a plan. That afternoon, before leaving for a business meeting, John left the door of his safe wide open. Inside was a fortune, stacks of crisp $100 bills, glittering jewelry, and documents worth millions. Anyone would be tempted. He hid a small camera in the corner of the study, his eyes glued to the live feed on his phone as he stepped outside. When Maria entered the room, she froze. Her eyes widened at the sight of the open safe. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring. John leaned forward, expecting her to pocket something. But then, Maria did something that stunned him. She carefully closed the safe door, pulled out a piece of paper, and wrote a note. "Sir, you must have forgotten to lock this. Please be careful. Not everyone is as trustworthy as you hope." John's chest tightened. For the first time in years, tears welled up in his eyes. John sat in his car, holding the note Maria had left behind. The words were simple, yet they struck him harder than any business deal or courtroom battle ever had. He had expected betrayal. He had braced himself for disappointment. But instead, he found integrity, quiet, humble, and powerful. The next morning, John couldn't concentrate. He kept replaying the scene in his mind. Who was this woman who could stand in front of a mountain of temptation and walk away untouched? At breakfast, he finally asked her to sit down with him. Maria looked startled, even nervous. She wasn't used to her employer inviting her to share the same table. "Maria," John began, his voice softer than usual, "I need to ask you something. Why didn't you take anything?" Maria lowered her eyes. "Because it doesn't belong to me, sir. My mother used to say, even if you're hungry, never eat what isn't yours. I live by that." John studied her carefully. She wasn't boasting, just speaking from the heart. He leaned forward. "Tell me about your family." Her voice trembled as she shared. She was a single mother, raising 2 children. Her husband had passed away years ago, and she had taken the maid's job to pay for their schooling. Life had been hard, but she believed in earning honestly, even if it meant having very little. John felt his throat tighten. All this time, he thought money was the measure of loyalty. But here was a woman with almost nothing, who still chose honesty over desperation. In that moment, he realized, perhaps wealth wasn't about what you kept locked away, but about the kind of trust and humanity you could give freely. That evening, John walked through his grand home, but it felt strangely empty. For years, he had surrounded himself with gold, antiques, and priceless art, yet none of it had ever touched his heart the way Maria's simple note had. The next day, instead of heading to his office, John stopped by the small school Maria's children attended. He introduced himself to the principal, quietly explaining that he wanted to cover their tuition anonymously. "But don't tell Maria," he added firmly. "I want her to keep her dignity." The principal smiled warmly. "You're giving them a future, Mr. Whitmore." That night, John observed Maria again as she tidied the living room. She hummed softly while dusting the shelves, the same shelves stacked with books she could never afford for her own children. He noticed the calluses on her hands, the quiet exhaustion in her eyes. The next morning, Maria arrived to work earlier than usual. John noticed her eyes were red, as if she had cried. But when he asked, she only smiled. "My kids came home yesterday with the biggest smiles," she said softly. "The school told me their fees were taken care of. I don't know who did it, but, whoever it was, God bless them." John turned away, hiding the lump in his throat. He wanted to tell her the truth right then, but something inside stopped him. Maybe, for once, it wasn't about recognition. Maybe kindness was most powerful when it asked for nothing in return. For the first time in decades, John felt wealth wasn't measured in dollars, it was measured in moments like this. A week later, John came down with a sudden fever. It wasn't serious, but for a man used to controlling every aspect of his life, the weakness unsettled him. He cancelled meetings, retreated to his study, and tried to sleep through the discomfort. Maria noticed right away. She brought him tea with ginger and honey, gently urging him to rest. But what touched John most was that she stayed late into the evening, long after her hours were done. She quietly sat in the corner, reading while he dozed, just so he wouldn't feel alone. "Maria," he whispered hoarsely at one point, "you don't have to stay. Go home to your children." She shook her head. "They're old enough to manage a night without me. But you, sir, you shouldn't be alone when you're unwell. Everyone needs someone to care for them." John stared at her, struck by the sincerity in her voice. For years, he had surrounded himself with staff, lawyers, and business partners, but when illness came, not one of them would have sat by his side. Yet here was Maria, a woman who had nothing to gain, giving her time and comfort freely. Later that night, as she left, she placed a small bowl of homemade soup on his bedside table. "This is my mother's recipe," she said with a shy smile. "It always made me feel better. I hope it helps you too." John tasted it after she left. It was simple, nothing fancy, yet it warmed him more than any gourmet meal money could buy. For the first time in years, he realized he didn't just employ Maria. He needed her, her kindness, her humanity. A few days later, John had fully recovered. But something inside him had changed. He could no longer look at Maria as just a maid. She had become a reminder of everything money couldn't buy: honesty, compassion, and loyalty. That evening, he called her into the study. Maria walked in nervously, glancing at the very same safe she had once closed for him. "Maria," John began, his voice steady but warm, "there's something I need to confess." She tilted her head, uncertain. "I left that safe open on purpose. I wanted to test you. I was foolish. I thought wealth could only be protected through suspicion. But you," his voice cracked, "you showed me wealth is safest in the hands of someone with integrity." Maria's eyes widened. You tested me?" John nodded slowly. "And you passed in a way I never expected. Maria, I also know about your children. I've arranged for their education, all expenses covered. And starting today, you are no longer my maid. I want you to manage my household as a partner. With a proper salary, benefits, and security." Tears filled Maria's eyes. She clasped her hands over her mouth, unable to speak. Finally, she whispered, "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." John shook his head. "Don't thank me. It's I who should thank you, for reminding me what humanity looks like." At that moment, they both realized the truth: kindness, when given freely, has the power to transform not just one life, but two. And for John Whitmore, the richest thing he now owned was not inside his safe, but in the bond of trust he had built with Maria.